I opened my front door and saw a thick envelope lying on the floor, my name printed in bold. At first, I thought it was just bills, maybe another reminder for something small. But the seal on the corner froze me. It was from the court. My hands shook as I tore it open, papers spilling out, heavy with words I couldn't believe. My parents were suing me. The amount written in black ink made my stomach drop, $350,000. I sank to the floor, staring at the pages, reading them over and over like maybe I had misunderstood. But no, every line was clear. My own parents had filed a lawsuit against me, demanding I pay my sister's mortgage. My chest tightened, my throat dry. I could hear my own heartbeat in the silence of the hallway. What kind of parents drag their own child into court? What kind of family turns love into numbers on a page? The betrayal stung deeper than anything I had ever felt. This wasn't just money. This was trust, shattered in the coldest way possible. I sat there, the papers spread out across my knees, and one question kept circling in my mind like a storm I couldn't escape. Why would they do this to me? It started, slowly, like a small drop of water hitting the same spot again and again until it wore me down. At first, it was just a suggestion from my mum on the phone. Your sister's house payment is a little high this month. Maybe you could help out just this once. I brushed it off, thinking it was temporary. Everyone struggles sometimes. But it didn't stop. My sister had bought a big house, bigger than she could ever afford, with high ceilings and a mortgage that could crush anyone's shoulders. Instead of admitting she had taken on too much, my parents turned their eyes on me. Family helps family, they reminded me every time we talked. The timing couldn't have been worse. I was already buried in my own responsibilities, student loans still hanging over me, rent to pay, groceries to buy, and the small amount I was trying to save for my future. I wasn't rich. I was just careful. I worked hard, budgeted every dollar, skipped nights out so I could have a safety net. But none of that mattered to them. Every call started the same way. My dad would ask about work. My mum would ask if I was eating well, and then came the real question. When will you transfer money for the mortgage? It didn't feel like a request anymore. It felt like a command dressed in polite words. Each time I hung up, I felt smaller, like my worth to them had been reduced to what I could give. All my life, I had been the responsible one, the child who fixed things when they went wrong. If the electricity bill was late, I found a way to cover it. If the car broke down, I dipped into my savings to pay the mechanic. When my parents fell behind on groceries, I swiped my card without asking for thanks. I had learned early that if I didn't step in, no one else would. My sister, on the other hand, lived as if the world would always bend for her. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. When she overspent, my parents called it enjoying life. When she failed at something, they said she was finding her path. Every mistake she made was forgiven, wrapped up in excuses and love. I watched it all quietly. I told myself it wasn't worth fighting over. If they needed me to be the strong one, I would be. If they wanted her to shine, I would step into the shadows. I believed that was what loyalty meant, keeping silent, even when it hurt. But silence doesn't erase pain. Every time I picked up the pieces, every time I stayed late at work to pay for someone else's mistake, something small inside me cracked. At the time, I didn't notice how deep those cracks were becoming. I only knew that no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. And no matter how little she gave, she was still the favourite. The seeds of anger were planted in me long before the mortgage demands. I just hadn't realised yet how deep their roots would grow. The calls grew harsher with time. What had once been gentle reminders turned into sharp demands. My parents no longer asked if I could help. They demanded to know when I would pay. "If you don't step up," my father said one night, his voice cold, "your sister will lose her house. Do you want to ruin her life?" The words hit me like stones. Ruin her life? As if I was the villain, as if her choices, her overspending, her arrogance, were somehow my responsibility. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear, and for the first time in years, I said no. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. I can't cover a $2,500 mortgage. I won't. The silence on the other end burned. Then came the disappointment, the guilt, the sighs heavy enough to crush me. But I didn't back down. I ended the call, my chest tight, my stomach knotted. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A message from my sister lit up the screen. "You're selfish. You owe me. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me." Then another. "Don't act like you're better than me just because you save money. You're pathetic." I stared at her words, my hands shaking with anger. She wasn't asking for help. She was demanding obedience. It had never really been about family. It was about control, about keeping me in the role they had written for me. The responsible one, the wallet, the silent shadow. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I began to wonder what would happen if I refused to play my part. One quiet evening, I came home from work and found a heavy envelope waiting on my doorstep. At first I thought, it was junk mail, maybe some promotion I didn't care about, but when I picked it up, my name stared back at me in bold letters, and the stamp in the corner made my chest tighten. It was from the court. I tore it open with shaky hands, and pages spilled out like a nightmare in print. My parents had filed a lawsuit against me. The number at the top nearly made me drop the papers, $350,000. They were claiming I had promised to support my sister's mortgage, that I had agreed to cover her debts. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I sat on the floor with the pages spread around me, reading line after line that twisted my life into lies. I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to this. It wasn't a promise. It was manipulation, dressed up in legal words. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult, any cruel text. These were my parents. The people who were supposed to protect me, who should have cared about my future, had dragged me into court like I was their enemy. For a long time, I just sat there, my hands shaking, tears running down my face. The weight of it all pressed against me, threatening to break me. But somewhere beneath the fear, another feeling stirred. Something sharper, stronger. If they wanted to gamble on fear, they had miscalculated. If they wanted a fight, they were finally going to get one. I wiped my eyes, gathered the papers into a neat pile, and whispered to myself, "Fine. If they want the truth, I'll give it to them." The next morning, I walked into a lawyer's office with the court papers clutched so tightly in my hands they were wrinkled. I half expected him to laugh at me, to say there was no way out. Instead, he spread the papers across his desk, adjusted his glasses, and read carefully. When he looked up, his face was calm. "They don't have a case," he said. My chest rose, hope flickering like a fragile flame. He explained that there was no signed agreement, no contract, nothing that bound me to pay for my sister's house. All they had was intimidation and the belief that guilt would do the work for them. Still, he didn't stop there. Together, we started digging. We pulled my sister's mortgage records, traced every signature, every form. That's when the truth came crashing down. My sister had lied to the bank about her income, inflating numbers to make it look like she could afford the house. My parents had co-signed, backing her up, helping her secure a loan she never should have had. And when the payments began to drown her, they turned to me as their solution. The more we uncovered, the angrier I became. For years I had been the quiet fixer. I paid bills when they were late, bought groceries when there was nothing in the fridge, covered emergencies when everyone else panicked. Now I opened old bank records and stacked them on the table, proof of every sacrifice I had made for them. Money that had slipped silently out of my hands because I believed family meant giving without question. My lawyer nodded as he flipped through the evidence. "This isn't about law," he said. "It's about control. They've used your loyalty for years, and now they're trying to make it permanent. But in court, facts matter more than guilt, and the facts are on your side." For the first time since the lawsuit began, I felt steady. I wasn't just defending myself, I was finally dragging the truth into the light. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. I walked in with my lawyer beside me, my pulse racing so hard it felt like everyone could hear it. Across the room, my parents and sister sat together, their faces smug, confident. They looked at me as if I were a child about to be scolded, certain the judge would take their side the moment they cried about family duty. When the session began, my parents spoke first. They painted themselves as victims, telling the judge how I had promised to help, how I was turning my back on my own sister. Their words dripped with guilt, the same guilt they had used on me my whole life. My mother even dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and my father shook his head like I had broken their hearts. But the judge wasn't moved. His expression stayed flat, eyes sharp as he asked for proof. That was when I handed over the folder my lawyer and I had prepared. Inside were bank transfers showing years of payments I had already made for my family, groceries, bills, emergencies. Receipts proving I had carried more than my share. And then came the texts, my sister's cruel messages, my parents' demands, the manipulations spelled out in black and white. As each page was read, the air in the room shifted. My parents stopped, looking so sure. My sister crossed her arms and stared at the floor. The judge leaned back, unimpressed with their emotional stories, more focused on the cold evidence in front of him. My heart pounded as I spoke, my voice shaking at first, but growing steadier with each word. I explained how I had never signed anything, never agreed to pay her mortgage, how this lawsuit was nothing more than pressure in its cruelest form. By the time I finished, the silence in the courtroom was heavy. The truth had been laid bare, and for once it wasn't me being drowned out by their voices. It was them, cornered by the facts they could no longer twist. The judge's voice was firm, his words cutting through the heavy silence of the courtroom. He looked at my parents and sister, his expression flat, almost disappointed. "This claim is dismissed," he said. "There is no evidence of a binding agreement. You cannot drag someone into court over imagined promises. Consider this your warning about filing false lawsuits." The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. My parents' faces turned bright red, a mix of anger and humiliation. They stood abruptly, chairs scraping loudly against the floor. My father muttered under his breath. My mother refused to look at me, and together they stormed out as if they were the ones betrayed. My sister stayed seated for a moment longer, her arms folded, her jaw clenched. She wouldn't meet my eyes. For once, she had nothing to say. I stayed in my seat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break free from my chest. Part of me felt heavy, weighed down by the heartbreak of realizing my own family had chosen humiliation and lies over love. But beneath that sorrow, something else stirred. Something lighter, sharper. It was freedom. The invisible chains I had carried for years, the guilt and the weight of responsibility they had placed on my shoulders, snapped in that moment. I breathed, deeply, as if for the first time, the courtroom air filling me with the taste of release. I hadn't just won a case. I had won myself back. After the court ended, I knew what I had to do. The old version of me would have tried to patch things up, to make peace at any cost, but that girl was gone. I cut off every financial tie that had chained me to them for years. No more paying bills that weren't mine, no more quiet transfers that emptied my savings. My sister's angry messages kept coming for a while. "You ruined everything. You owe me, you're heartless." But they hit a wall of silence. I blocked her number, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty. I kept my distance from my parents too. Calls went unanswered. Visits stopped. The house that once pulled me in with guilt and duty became just another place on a map. I decided my peace was worth more than their approval. With the weight finally off my shoulders, I started building a life that felt like mine. I moved into a small apartment that was modest but full of light, every corner decorated the way I wanted. I invested in a small business idea I had put on hold for years, and for once, the money I spent was on my own dreams, not someone else's mistakes. I even started therapy, a place where I could pour out the years of hurt I had bottled up, where I learned that love without respect isn't love at all. I realized family is not defined by blood. Blood ties can choke just as easily as they can protect. Real family is built on respect, on kindness, on balance. The people who cheer for you without asking for your bank account, the ones who stand beside you even when you say no, that's family. Looking back, I see now that they never wanted me to be free. They wanted me to carry them until I broke. But I didn't break. I chose myself, and in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I had. They tried to bury me under their debt, but I chose to rise, and I rose higher than they ever imagined.